Carl, a little boy, lives in a small village with his parents. His father was a corn farmer there, and as he saw him toil away every day, he developed sympathy for him and decided to assist him. Initially, his father forbade it, telling Carl to concentrate on his studies and play with the other kids, but after repeated requests, his father ultimately agreed to let him assist him. A few years later, when Carl was growing something in the garden, his mother unexpectedly appeared and told him to get ready. Carl's departure day for the United States Naval military training selection turns out to be today. Although his father still had to say those words because he wanted his son to be able to concentrate on work and become a great person in the city without having to care about his family, he begged him never to go back to the countryside at the time of their separation. But Carl only takes a culinary position after he gets to the military base. Black individuals could not enlist in the American military at the time. They continued to believe that black people were slaves who were forced to labor at the white people's expense. The following day, Carl and his friends noticed a white pupil swimming in their class. His companion clarified that white people and black people had different swimming schedules. He questioned why it had to be distinct since they are both humans after learning about it. Then he foolishly decided to try swimming, and as soon as Carl arrived, everyone there began to ridicule him. Even the ship's captain gave his aide the go-ahead to throw him overboard. He was imprisoned in the punishment room as a result of the incident. When the ship's captain arrived, he declared that Carl's swimming pace had impressed him. He was then added to the rescue swim team by the captain. Carl was overjoyed to hear that. Then he quickly wrote his folks a letter to let them know. He witnessed a helicopter crash in the middle of the sea the following day. The ship's captain, who was in a panic, instantly gave the diver the job of saving the helicopter pilot. The diver, at last, made it out after a protracted wait. Chief Sunday is the name of the diver, and he is a Master Chief Diver in the Navy. Unfortunately, even though the pilot was safely evacuated, Master Chief is the highest dive team and his life was not able to be spared. The co-pilot, who is still in the water, is then rescued by a second diver who has descended. Since the diver's clothing weighed more than 200 kilograms in that year, only one diver can save the individual in this situation. When it was time for the second diver to descend, the safety line broke, sending the diver plummeting to the ocean below. Without a wetsuit, Chief Sunday bravely dives in to save him. They both eventually pulled through and lived. His lungs were seriously hurt as a result of the incident, and he was sent to the hospital. The physician also prohibited him from diving until he was fully recovered. After learning the physician's conclusion, he became angry and caused a scene. He attempted to hire an accountant for yesterday's ruckus the following day. The whole military navy, including Carl, attended the trial. He was then demoted to dive team coach by the captain. Carl approaches the captain once the trial is over and requests permission to take part in diving instruction at the base. He claimed that after witnessing Chief Sunday's rescue yesterday, he was astounded and vowed to emulate Chief Sunday's heroics. When the captain observed his fierce dedication, his heart warmed, and he was permitted to switch from the swimming division to the diving division. The guard received the letter of duty from him when he arrived at the training facility the following day. Because no black individual had ever been permitted entry to the marine installation, the guards initially appeared perplexed. The arrival of Chief Sunday didn't take long. He will serve as the dive camp's coach, it turns out. Carl then explains his motivation for visiting, but Chief Sunday instead made fun of him by suggesting that the black man was unable to be a diver. Carl could only remain mute and patient after hearing his slur that black people only deserve to be cooks. When the Chief Sunday returned in the evening, he was sick of seeing Carl still standing outside the gate, so he stayed to wait at the gate till then. When the camp saw his perseverance, he was eventually allowed inside. A student named Snow Hill came up to him. The only white person who would have greeted Carl regardless of his skin tone was him. He then revealed that Mr. Pappy, a former Marine, was in charge of the camp Wawas. When Chief Sunday arrived, he informed everyone present that Carl was now a part of the student training camp at the camp. Snow Hill then led him to his dorm room where he saw a new white student who had refused to accept Carl's entrance. After hearing the coach's remarks, the other students departed the dorm one by one, saying it would be better to leave the Navy than to share a room with black people, until all that is left is Carl and Snow Hill. The chief tells Carl that because Chief Sunday allows black people, his reputation has been harmed, and he should know the position, forcing him to get up, dragging him outside, and even watering him. Carl was able to endure the chief's abuse in some unfathomable way. Carl's initial training starts the next day. Chief emphasized that because swimming and diving are two separate activities, many people would fail this first practice. The chief chooses to test Snow Hill's diving abilities because he is aware that Snow Hill is the best swimmer in his hometown. He advances, and then he is dropped into the sea. He instantly removes Snow Hill from the training day because he can't dive. After a day, Carl and the other students kept up their training until the written exam, at which point Carl received poor marks. The officer will let them know that he will be kicked out of training over the semester break since he went to the city library to study for the next test and received a poor score. There he met Jo, a librarian. She was a nursing major, but when Carl asked her to help him study, she declined, claiming that the lecture on the Navy was extremely challenging and would take months for Carl to fully grasp. Carl's perseverance has finally convinced her to offer her assistance. Carl finally succeeded in earning high marks. The sunken ship was to be welded by two new students named Rook and Ashar when Chief Sunday returned to teaching diving in the afternoon. However, as soon as Ashar started welding once more, the ship began to move and nearly collapsed into a ravine. Ashar's air hose became. Then, with no other option, Carl offered to save them both. They then had 5 minutes to save both of them before they ran out of air, according to Chief Sunday. During his efforts to save them, a scared Rook fled from Carl. Despite becoming irritated, he keeps his attention on his goal of aiding Ashar. After that, Chief Sunday read the Navy Commander's Award. Rook received it even though Carl was crucial in preserving the lives of his teammates. Because he was black, the commander continued to refuse to recognize his services. When other pupils witness Carl's patience, they gradually start to feel sympathetic toward him and want to be friends with him. He phoned his rural family the following day. His mother called and told him that his father had passed away. When Carl learns the news, he begins to cry, and his mother explains that his father purposely kept his illness a secret from him so that Carl could continue to concentrate on his studies and pursue his objectives without worrying about his father's condition, who was critically ill. Carl is approached by a woman while he is waiting, and it turns out that she is Chief Sunday's wife. The chief's wife then remarked that they both presently have the same fate and that their wedding day makes her unhappy as well. Chief Sunday opted to go out with his partner instead. She then extends an invitation to Carl to visit the bar where her husband is having a party. When they arrived at the pub, everyone in the Navy stared at Carl at once, and Chief Sunday was informed. Carl is then reprimanded by the chief and informed that black people don't belong there. Carl grew enraged after hearing the taunts and, for the first time, dared to defy his coach. He cried out that his coach was jealous of him since he was superior to him. Chief Sunday then challenges Carl to a breath-holding underwater as Jo was at the bar and she was perplexed by the noise. The chief will kick Carl out of the training camp if he fails, but, if Carl triumphs, Snow Hill will be allowed back in. Carl, who had become tired of his coach's constant taunts, decided to accept the offer right away. After winning the match, Carl is perplexed as to why Jo is nowhere to be seen. He then pursues Jo and asks her why she left. She clarified that she had come to say goodbye because she had been offered a position outside of the city and was departing the following day. He was shocked when he learned about it, and he then foolishly tried to propose to Jo. He vowed to see her after he completed his training. The following day, Mr. Pappy called Chief Sunday and instructed him to fail Carl on the exam scheduled for tomorrow under any circumstances. No black persons were to graduate from their camp, according to Mr. Pappy. Even though neither of them loved Carl, Chief detested the way Mr. Pappy abused his authority to further his interests. Since the episode from yesterday, he had realized that Carl was far superior to him. The radio Carl's father handed him was instantly smashed by the distraught Chief. Carl becomes depressed upon realizing that the one gift his father had given him was broken.